Welcome to CBNext Live. This is the second edition of the Next News Review. I'm Franklin Katunda, and I want to welcome all of you back to this edition. Thank you for your feedback after the first edition we had successfully aired out there in April of this year. Let's start with the monthly news review. Beacon Hill versus the city of Boston. We begin with a story that accounts the way drills back and forth placed within our government make things hard. It is a tale of a showdown and a choice between profits in leisure business versus enforcing public health measures. A Massachusetts House of Representatives vote on a bill regarding cigar bars that proves once again how lobbyist interests frequently abuse the processes of democracy to push laws that endanger the protection and the welfare of citizens to the benefit of corporate interests. Thomas Menino, the legendary mayor of the city of Boston, found himself rebutted by lawmakers after he passed an order to close cigar bars operating in the Boston area by 2018. North End Democrat Representative Aaron Miklovich, whose electorate district is home to 2 cigar bars, got so smart with Mayor Menino when he argued that the cigar bars are, quote, he said, part of the total package of coming into the North End. You have a dinner, you have a drink, and sometimes that includes a cigar, end of quote. Meanwhile, the Boston Globe reports that anti-smoking groups lost in this lawmaking battle to an overwhelmingly pro-cigar House of Representatives. But they were at least able to get a concession to the measure which will only free up cigar smoking rights in Massachusetts cities and towns with less than 150,000 inhabitants. In this case, as the Boston Globe, the cities of Boston, Worcester, and Springfield will still be ordered to close their cigar bars by the deadline of 2018. Now, how did the pro-cigar bill got into the Massachusetts House of Representatives floor? That's the question that we want to answer. This is a question that usually a lot of people out there have, but they don't know how the processes of democracy work in the U.S. Congress. So for the purpose of this story, State Congressman Aaron Miklovich stuck the measure into the state annual budget bill, maneuvering the process and trying to overcome a lobbying campaign by the American Cancer Society and other anti-smoking groups. On Beacon Hill, Governor Deval Patrick articulated on the issue that the bill will interfere with health officials' duties to protect the health of residents. All these government drills back and forth, as summarized in this one story, tells you how you citizens and consumers are affected by what the executive and the legislative branches of our government does. They cheat most of the time on the process of democracy to pass interest-driven laws that affect, for good or for bad, the well-being of our population. We go to Washington, D.C., the White House. Still good news for Mr. President as elections approach. 53% of American voters now believe that President Obama deserves to be re-elected, while the approval rating hit 60%, the highest in the past 2 years. Amazingly, the latest Associated Press GFK poll conducted shortly after the news of the death of Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden was announced came as a boost and surely helped the sitting president after he released a few days ago his certificate of live birth. Another poll on his favor for these 2010 presidential elections shows that nearly 2/3 of independent voters approve his job, while only a half had approved his job 2 months ago. The news of Obama's soaring approval rating turned out to be a series of bad news for Republican hopeful and undeclared candidates such as Mr. Donald Trump, who immediately quit from his prospecting campaign claiming credit for being the only American to challenge the president to produce his long overdue birth certificate. The issue has been a long-time distraction since the 44th president took office in 2009. Leftist news analysts all agree that the issue was raised for the first time during the Democratic primaries in 2008 presidential election, when subsequently, later on, it was used by the radical fringe of the Republican Party since 2009 inaugural address. And this was aimed to hurt the American people's confidence in their president and weaken, ipso facto, the Democrats. During the last midterm elections and suffering from the 2008 U.S. economy recession, many Democrat lawmakers lost the elections because of negative campaign done by the right-wing Tea Party, also dealing with some internal policy differences on the financial crisis bailout, the Wall Street reform, and then also the health care reform within their own ranks. A big chunk of Democrats, they call blue dog, the moderates, I may say, not being able to deliver on their local politics back in their districts, lost seats in Congress as a result. We stay at the White House at the Lafayette Park. A group of Congolese protesters stood side by side with Syrian protesters to voice their opinions, shattering slogans and chants in the direction of the oval lofty windows standing across the office of the President of the United States at the White House. They carry with them signs showing evidences and the names of those who were victims of impunity and the lack of rule of law in the Democratic Republic of Congo. On a quiet Saturday and a beautiful day of summer, and while the president's calendar shows he was likely to be in the building, members of the Apareco Alliance organized a group of Congolese protesters who made sure they brought with them megaphones and musical instruments that helped them boost their demonstration for hours. Later on, a White House security deputy came out to ask organizers the reasons why they were there and why they were protesting. That alone added to the media coverage that showed up at the Lafayette Park from the community networks of bloggers encouraged protesters to a longer and effective sit-in. According to the critics of the procedure in advocating through marches, they believe that writing slogans in French and singing most of the songs and speeches in the African languages constitute a barrier and a confusion in the camp of those English speakers who are supposed to be the recipients of the message. Ironically, giving a plausible alternative to the critics, CBNext Live, in its vision to help close the gap on the language barrier, conducted an interview in English after the protest. Please watch the Alliance representatives who spoke to us from the rooftop of one of the capital's high-rise buildings. Watch this video.
Recently, I may say, just yesterday, we had a major rally here in Washington D.C. Also to raise a voice, and there is a memo that we have sent to the State Department and a copy to Mr. Obama with our proposal on which way we may go. We were talking especially to, we were warning the international community of the risk of another clash in the Congo with those elections coming in October. Why are we saying that? Because there is actually not an attempt but proof that the government in place led by Kabila is trying to put on hold actually the elections in the Congo, and everything that should be done, such as the registration of the electors, the kits for those elections, even the foundings are missing, and we don't feel that on the date that they may say November 28th, the elections will be taking place in the Congo. And our fear is, since we are going to end up in an illegal situation, what is going to be taking place in the Congo? So, Apareko is saying, since the Congo is under occupation, we may sit down and bring into trial all those people involved, such as Kunda Batwari, who was actually in Rwanda. We don't have any news from him. Bosco Tanganda, there's a mandate from ICC for Bosco Tanganda, but that gentleman is sitting inside of the Congo. We don't know what he's doing. And seeing also people being killed in the Congo without any serious trial. I'm talking about Floribert Chebeya, the activist of human rights, and we try to ask all those big countries, those that want to teach us as a Congolese the democracy, to help us to put the real democracy into the Congo. So we are here just as a hand to do the job, and that's what the organization is doing all over the places where we are representing to raise a voice, to reach administrations.
The Apareko activists also told us they brought in an English written memo they handed over to the White House and the State Department. They are calling Washington to act in preventing escalation of violence in the DR Congo. They emphasized on the need of an imminent departure of Mr. Kabila, the president. They reminded President Obama on the issues that the United States know for quite a while, DR Congo being the world's worst humanitarian crisis ever since the World War II. According to a recent U.S. study by independent researchers, the highest numbers of rapes were found in war-ravaged North Kivu, where an average of 67 women out of 1,000 have been raped at least once. Government spokesman Mr. Lambert Mende, speaking on the results of the study, told the BBC that recent increases in rape figures were a result of better reporting rather than a rising in violence. Publicly claiming a different argument, the Congolese DC protesters, patriots as they call themselves, complained in front of the Oval Office about the incapacity and the lack of will or the creepy silence by the Congolese government to secure the defenseless population in villages. In most of their interviews with the media, including the CBNext English version you just watched earlier, they were fervent to remind Washington that the 10-year-old Kabila's regime does not align with the principles of human rights, citizens' rights, and democracy in the DR Congo. Thus far, they argued, a Kinshasa's report card at this time will put the President of the United States in the wrong side of history, they said, because they believe that President Obama, then Senator Obama, had championed these policies principle in the U.S. Congress when it comes to the U.S.-Congo relationships. We go straight to London, UK. While most news networks enjoyed their 2 weeks camping at the Buckingham Palace, reporting on the royal wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton, circles of activist groups in London have been working hard and making news, calling the United Kingdom to listen to the cry of the oppressed people at the distant territory. The UK-based NGO Save the Congo released a statement last May in anticipation of the UN Security Council's vote on the future of the UN keeping forces in Congo. The vote was passed recently and was in favor of keeping these forces in the Congo. But in the press release we received from the organization, the UK's progressive Jewish community made of 61 rabbis, representing thousands of congregants across the entire United Kingdom, signed a petition in solidarity with the people of Congo. The letter calls on foreign affairs ministers of the top 10 countries known as the world's major aid donors to the African Great Lakes countries, including Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi, to urgently undertake sustained diplomatic efforts to help secure peace, security, and justice in the DR Congo. Since 1998, over 5.4 million of innocent civilians, mostly women and children, died, and the over-decade conflict had a huge number of about 1.2 million of refugees and internally displaced persons. Save the Congo, a UK-based non-governmental funded and non-political organization, demands for an increased pressure on Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi to ensure their territories are not used as a trading or transit ground for conflict minerals from the Congo, and that weapons don't fall into the hands of armed groups in the DR Congo. David Mitchell, the rabbi, among the petitioners, reflected on the fact that, quote, the major tenet of Judaism asks not to ignore the suffering of others, end of quote. For the records, tens of thousands of London residents, immigrants from the Congo, are activists against the war in their native country, and more, they are fundamentally opponents to Mr. Kabila's regime. CBNext Live interviewed the organization's director in Washington, D.C. on the mission he is carrying out in the nation's capital. So watch the video with Eric Miller.
We're trying to make sure that there's an accountability, that anyone militarily trained by the UK government is not, for example, a member of the CNDP, is not a war criminal, and that this funding, we want to make sure that any bilateral aid between the UK and indeed the West and the United States is not used as a method of attacking the Congo. The appeal is a very good start, but we have to do more. And I'm very glad that we got so many people, so many rabbis, to sign on to this appeal. To end the genocide in the Congo, we need more actions, not more words. Everyone talks about how they'd love to do this, what would take place, but we've seen very little concrete actions. And the key thing that we can do is, first of all, make sure that any bilateral humanitarian assistance is accountable, that's not used for pillage, and indirectly fueling a proxy war between the Congo and its eastern neighbors.
We go straight to Brussels, Belgium. Journalist arrested, released, and now restricted from traveling from his native country. He is in danger. This has been a developing story at our editorial desk. A Congolese news anchor and reporter in Brussels named Babi Balokuna was arrested May 2nd, 2011, while he was responding to a call for a sit-down with Mr. Kanyama, a chief police officer of the National Police in the capital city of Kinshasa. TV anchor Babi Balokuna, whose presence in Brussels is well noticed, was visiting Congo as he had done in the past several years. Last April 24th, 2011, he was selected by the opposition leader Etienne Tshisekedi to introduce him to a 50,000 plus people presidential campaign that was organized by the UDPS. Meanwhile, as the news spread out across European cities where Mr. Balokuna has countless of online viewers, several coalitions of activists quickly announced a sit-in at 100 Marie Bourgogne Avenue in Brussels, the office of the Embassy of the DR Congo in Belgium. They announced another sit-in on May 12, just a few hours before the news broke from Kinshasa that the journalist was released from prison. The reporter was freed in Kinshasa and was given a press conference, but then most advocates out there and activists are invoking Article number 17 and 23, which protect citizens in the case of prosecution and in the case of freedom of speech for journalists. Radio Okapi, a UN-affiliate radio, reported on May 31st that the reporter's passport was held at the airport departure gates by the Congolese Immigration Authority. And now we're having a breaking news coming at our editorial desk as we walk in today, that the same reporter was aggressed June 19, 2011, at the Kinshasa TV station by 10 individuals armed with machetes, and he was stabbed with 2 wounds in the back as a result of attack. The incident took place at 10 p.m. after he finished his show that was titled Supporting Etienne Tshisekedi, the opposition leader. Police showed up hours later just to tell him, according to sources that we got, that he was a member of the PPRD, therefore he wasn't supposed to get protection. And the journalist will confer to his on the news outlet that the immigration seized his document for reason of document verification and never brought it back to him up until now. So all we learn as of now is that the journalist is stuck in Kinshasa and has been restricted to leave his country to go to Belgium. The segment we're gonna now go for is the second one, which is the press review. This segment will give us newspapers' relevant headlines. Some of them were brought to you in collaboration with our friends from Congo Forum Belgium at congoforum.be, and we are translating some of them as they come to our desk. Looking into the monthly press review, the newspaper La Prospérité writes on its May edition that the European Union has nothing prepared for 2011 elections. According to the newspaper, the European community won't deploy its armed forces in the DR Congo as previously done by the U4 during the 2006 presidential elections. Mr. Richard Zenk, European Union ambassador in Kinshasa, said, reports the journalist, that France, the MONUSCO, UN forces in Congo, and the European Commission will provide logistical support to the PNC, the national police, to reinforce its operations. The European Commission is willing to donate, this time, 47.5 million in euro money, writes the La Prospérité, citing the European diplomat. Meanwhile, a press release from the African agency Pana Press shows the 2010 early numbers on contributions that Western countries were willing to donate in preparation of the Congo's 2011 presidential polls. The African press agency mentions that Belgium will put on the table 14 million euro, which money will be handled by the Electoral Cycle Support Project called PACE, and by the UNDP, which is the United Nations Program for Development, as to say that from 2006 to 2011, numbers in money pledged have been decreasing. When 2006 polls boycotted by opposition leaders because of allegedly fraud, got a funding of not less than $460 million from the international community, and were backed by the world's largest UN peacekeeping force. The 2011 elections, in its turn, funds CBNext from our data is just funded at nearly 1/10 of the last polls, with only $50 million so far. The Washington Post edition of May 10th, citing the Associated Press, reported that Congo's high education minister survives attack on his convoy during visit to countryside. Armed gunmen blocked the road he was traveling on, writes the DC newspaper, then suddenly appear out of the bush and open fire. A police officer and a driver were killed at the end of it. The newspaper Le Potentiel headlined on the same story on violence in the DR Congo under the title Recurrent Tensions in the East and the Well-Managed Chaos. The Congolese newspaper talks about some armed individual from the ranks of the FDLR of Rwanda and the FARDC of Congo to be the leading signal of the balkanization of the Congo's territory. And here the newspaper Potentiel gives more details on the recent victim, insisting that the FDLR attacked the Congo's Minister of Higher Education, Mr. Leonard Meshako Kamba. After escaping death, writes the newspaper, the Congolese official quickly pleaded to reinforce the security of civilians in the eastern Congo, agreeing on an interview with Radio Okapi that, quote, "What we've been through is what the population goes through every day." So the same national figure reminds the potential former close ally of the late President Kabila had claimed months earlier that the FDLR was, quote, "an issue of the past." And CBNext learned from various reports that the elements of the CNDP, a militia that was led by Congo Army ex-general and former Rwandan rebel Laurent Kunda Batware, were speedily integrated. Those elements were speedily integrated in the Congolese army and have never thrown away their past behavior even while wearing the new Congo Army's uniform. CBNext Live, in my recent trip to Washington, D.C., interviewed Mr. Eric Muller, who is the acting director of the UK-based NGO. The subject of both FDLR and the CNDP Rwandan militias' presence in the Eastern Congo came up in this video. Please watch it.
The UN is in an impossible position. Right now they need more logistic support, they need more helicopters, they need more staff, and they need better troops. It's not a question of quantity, it's a question of quality. And what MONUSCO desperately needs is to have a brigade of special forces sent to them to aid them in their effort to disarm the militia groups. This could turn the tide and help stabilize the region. MONUSCO also needs real-time intelligence sharing provided by the United States and other Western powers, and it also needs unmanned aerial vehicles. These could be used to target the leaders of these militia groups, and from there we can begin truly disarming these factions. A lot of the militia groups, the members themselves don't want to fight, but they can't leave because the hardcore leadership won't let them do so. So if we can use the UAVs to target them, then we'll have a better chance. Now, we very reluctantly endorse the use of force, but in this case, due to the nature of the conflict and how bad it is, we believe that it is necessary. In order to save more lives, unfortunately, force must be used.
And the newspaper started to conclude that operations for peace and integration in the DR Congo, such as Kimia, Umoja, and Amani, all have amounted to one thing in common: helping the FDLR militia to just buy more time and reorganize. A fourth story we have on our press review: patients admitted to a Buea Regional Hospital in Cameroon are at risk and high risk of contamination by diseases because of the water supply crisis in that hospital. This is what we learned from the Cameroonian independent newspaper called The Post. The hospital has been running for some 3 years without regular water supply, the Post newspaper found, and at best, water flows scarcely, and at worst, the precious basic commodity to supply water is absent in this hospital. The report found toilets sealed off and put out of order, and this is the situation the reporter has actually investigated June 27 when he went down to the hospital. It happened to be the biggest and the most important health facility in the southwest region in Cameroon. Dr. Nije found himself disturbed by the fact that since November 2010, writes the Post, this facility has admitted about 300 patients with cases of cholera disease. According to the regional hospital director, the water supply system that was intended to help 25,000 people in the 80s in this locality of Buea is the same today. And he sees the situation getting even worse if nothing is done, considering that the population keeps on growing rapidly. The fifth story on our press review is the June edition of the New York Times, reporting that the judge in Manhattan, New York, freed Mr. Strauss-Khan from house arrest on Friday, July 2nd, 2011. while the case against him appeared to be collapsing. After the arrest of the French National IMF Managing Director, Mr. Strauss-Khan, the district's attorney office faced a question of whether to ask a judge to keep him in custody, reports the New York Times. During our CBNext live interviews in Paris, most opinion voiced that Mr. Strauss-Khan was to be protected under the law until proven guilty. Several folks who were interviewed felt sorry for the potential candidate to presidential elections in France who could face off President Sarkozy when he went down on the tube with this news. They took offense and say that the law in France prohibits the French media to broadcast pictures of a handcuffed suspect until he is prosecuted and tried and proven guilty. So most people we interviewed called for patience until justice is served. At the same time, they don't believe, I might say, that there is a connection between the case and the elections in France. Nonetheless, many of them refused to be on the camera while we were conducting interviews. While only 1 out of 10 women solicited agreed to be on the camera, and 3 out of 10 people of both genders solicited agreed to appear on screens. And in the same time, 2 polls in France, as reported by the Associated Press, showed that an almost even division is now drawn between those who think Strauss-Khan should return to politics and those who believe his political career is over. His next session in the New York court is scheduled for July 18th. This is just 5 days after the deadline for candidates to register in the Social Party primary. And this concludes our press review on the next news review. And to close, we have the news of the day, or the tip of the day. For today, we will have the news of the day. From a press release we received via PR News, a Maryland-based company, Used Network Systems, LCC, the global leader in broadband, satellite networks and services, today announced the deployment of several HX system broadband satellite networks for Microcom DR Congo, which is a leading internet service provider in the DR Congo. Microcom founder Mr. Leon Talley is operating the HX systems to provide now high-speed internet access, corporate intranet, and VPN services to customers in the Congo. That's good news for us at CBNext, and then also for you, our viewers, because we hope to expand our audience via broadband to the DR Congo. At this time, to the exception of some connected businesses and wealthier families, access to the internet has been a nightmare and for online surfers in the DR Congo. So they usually have to wait 30 to 45 seconds for an internet page to load up. And if it didn't freeze up, the 60-second timeout. So the news of this new technology coming to the DR Congo is good. It's good for us at CBNext, for you, our viewers, and then also for the audience. We're expecting to expand in the Democratic Republic of Congo and elsewhere in Africa. That's it for us, and we will take time to thank all of you for the feedback, the reactions, and the outpouring of your supports following the first edition of the next news review. And of course, we will use all these reactions and suggestions to improve the work here at CBNext Live. Don't hesitate to contact us if you have anything that you would like to contribute as opinions and news to our network. I would like to thank our producer, Angel Mukadi, and then also the editorial staff we have here at CBNext Live. I'm Franklin Katunda, live from our newly modern building on 183 Interstate in Irving, Texas. Thank you for watching.